President Donald Trump has called his wife's new movie beautiful, emotional, fashionable and cinematic. But there is just one problem. No one is going to see it.
The film is called Melania. It cost around $60 million to make. It follows the First Lady over 20 days before the 2025 inauguration. And it opened in Australia today amid cancelled screenings, empty cinemas and just a handful of tickets sold.
In January 2026, a documentary film about First Lady Melania Trump arrived in cinemas across the United States and several international markets. The release of this film, simply titled Melania, marked an unusual moment in American politics and entertainment. For the first time, a sitting First Lady had executive-produced a documentary about her own life, one that would receive a theatrical release in thousands of cinemas worldwide. The project promised an intimate look at her experiences during the 20 days leading up to her husband's second presidential inauguration. However, the film's journey from concept to screen and its reception upon release tells a story about ambition, investment, and the unpredictable nature of public interest. The documentary was directed by Brett Ratner, a filmmaker known for commercial successes like the Rush Hour franchise. This marked Ratner's return to directing after several years away from the industry following multiple allegations of sexual misconduct in 2017, which he has denied. According to reports from entertainment industry publications, Amazon MGM Studios acquired the distribution rights to Melania in January 2025 for $40 million. This figure alone represented one of the largest sums ever paid for a documentary film. When combined with an estimated $35 million spent on marketing and promotion, the total investment reached approximately $75 million, making it the most expensive documentary production in history, according to industry analysts. The origins of the project trace back to the period following the 2024 presidential election, when Donald Trump secured his return to the White House. During this time, according to reports, the idea for the documentary emerged either through a conversation between Melania Trump and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos at Mar-a-Lago, or through discussions with her senior advisor, Mark Beckman. The First Lady signed on as executive producer and maintained editorial control over the film's content throughout production. Multiple streaming platforms reportedly competed for the rights, with Disney offering around $14 million before Amazon's winning bid of $40 million secured not only the film but also the rights to produce a follow-up documentary series. The film's promotional campaign began in earnest in December 2025 when the first trailer was released to the public. Melania Trump herself participated actively in marketing efforts. On January 28, 2026, 2 days before the film's theatrical release, she rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange and made brief remarks promoting the documentary. President Donald Trump also joined the promotional effort, posting endorsements on his Truth Social platform and describing the film in glowing terms. According to industry tracking data, Amazon spent approximately $3.5 million on national television advertising between late December and late January. The marketing reached an estimated 461 million household impressions, with the highest-reaching programs appearing on Fox News. Additional promotional efforts included an event at the Sphere in Las Vegas and billboards throughout Los Angeles, though some of these outdoor advertisements faced vandalism. The film follows Melania Trump through a 20-day period before the January 2025 inauguration, presenting what the producers described as an intimate and unfiltered look at her life. The documentary shows her managing various responsibilities, including business matters, philanthropic work, family obligations, and preparations for returning to the White House. The runtime clocks in at 104 minutes, and the film received a PG rating. A premiere screening took place at the Kennedy Center in Washington, which had recently been renamed the Trump Kennedy Center. This event drew approximately 70 guests, including notable figures such as Queen Rania of Jordan, Apple CEO Tim Cook, Amazon executives Mike Hopkins and Andy Jassy, boxer Mike Tyson, and various political figures and celebrities. A private screening was also held at the White House on the Saturday before the public release, with guests receiving commemorative popcorn boxes and cookies. For the theatrical rollout, Amazon MGM Studios planned an unusually wide release for a documentary. The film opened in an estimated 1,500 to 2,000 theaters across the United States and Canada, with additional screenings planned in over 20 countries through Film Nation Entertainment. In the United Kingdom, more than 100 cinemas were scheduled to show the film. This scale of release is rare for documentaries, which typically receive limited theatrical runs before moving to streaming platforms. The theatrical component was reportedly a required element of Amazon's acquisition deal. However, as the release date approached, signs emerged suggesting that audience interest might not match the scale of the investment or the breadth of the release. Analysis of ticket sales through the Fandango platform in the days before opening showed concerning patterns. According to a review published by Wired, which examined nearly 1,400 scheduled screenings, only 2 theaters in the entire United States had sold out shows: the AMC Classic Indian River 24 in Vero Beach, Florida, and the AMC Independence Commons 20 in Independence, Missouri. Social media users began sharing screenshots showing minimal advance ticket sales at various locations. At some venues, screenings showed 0 seats sold even within 48 hours of showtime. A theater in Minnesota cancelled its screenings entirely before opening day. Industry projections for the opening weekend varied significantly. Early tracking data from the National Research Group suggested the film might earn approximately $5 million during its opening weekend. However, other estimates were notably lower. Box Office Pro predicted an opening between $1 and $2 million. CNN's chief data analyst Harry Enton publicly forecasted an opening in the range of $1 to $5 million. These projections stood in stark contrast to the film's massive budget and the scope of its release. When the film opened on Friday, January the 30th, the situation proved more complex than the dire predictions suggested. The documentary brought in close to $3 million on its opening day, according to box office tracking services. Weekend projections were subsequently revised upward to approximately $8 million for the 3-day opening period. While this figure exceeded the lowest predictions, it still represented a dramatic underperformance relative to the investment. For context, the highest-grossing documentary of all time, Fahrenheit 9/11, earned approximately $41 million when adjusted for inflation during its opening weekend in 2004. Recent, successful documentaries like RBG had operated on far smaller budgets, with RBG's marketing budget reported at just $3 million compared to Melania's $35 million marketing spend. The $8 million opening, while making Melania the strongest documentary opening in roughly a decade, tells a story of significant disconnect between investment and return. Entertainment industry analysts noted that ticket sales were heavily concentrated in specific geographic markets and demographics. According to data from Entelligence, an entertainment research firm, the strongest markets for the film included Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Orlando, and West Palm Beach. These cities are located in states that Donald Trump won in the 2024 presidential election. The audience skewed heavily toward viewers over 60 years old and toward rural markets. Box office tracking indicated that capacity rates across theaters averaged around 4%, meaning that in a typical Hausant 100-seat auditorium, approximately 4 seats were occupied during screenings. International reception proved even more challenging. In the United Kingdom, at least 1 journalist reported being the sole attendee at a morning screening. The situation in Australia, which received the film ahead of the US release, showed similar patterns of sparse attendance. In Sydney and Melbourne, some screenings attracted audiences in the single digits despite being held in venues with capacities of 100 seats or more. Most dramatically, the film's release in South Africa was cancelled entirely. Thobashan Govindarajulu, head of sales and distribution for Filmfinity, the local distributor, stated that the company had decided not to proceed with the theatrical release based on recent developments, though the specific reasons were not publicly detailed. The contrast between professional critical reception and audience ratings added another layer to the film's unusual release. On Rotten Tomatoes, the aggregated review site, the film received a critic's score of 7%, based on 15 professional reviews. Only 1 critic gave a positive review. On Metacritic, another aggregation platform, the film scored 4 out of 100, classified as overwhelming dislike. However, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes told a dramatically different story. Verified ticket buyers gave the film a 99% rating, creating a 92-point gap between critics and audiences. This represented one of the largest such disparities in the platform's history. The verified audience reviews came predominantly from supporters of Donald Trump and positive comments about the First Lady, while critical reviews from professional film critics were uniformly negative or highly skeptical of the film's approach and content. The documentary's performance highlighted questions about the relationship between political support and entertainment consumption, the value of celebrity documentaries in the streaming age, and the unusual circumstances surrounding high-profile productions backed by sitting political figures. The fact that a film with such massive financial backing and promotional support could generate such polarized responses and modest attendance numbers relative to its investment became itself a subject of discussion in entertainment industry circles and political commentary. At the premiere event, the First Lady announced that a follow-up documentary series was already in production, featuring entirely new footage. This announcement came before the theatrical performance of the first film could be fully evaluated, suggesting confidence in the project despite the mixed signals from the box office and critical reception. The series was described as being in active production with an anticipated release in the coming months, though specific details about its content, length, or distribution plans were not provided at that time. Professional film critics responded to Melania with overwhelming negativity, marking one of the most uniformly poor receptions for any widely released documentary in recent years. Writing for Variety, Owen Gleiberman described the film as orchestrated and airbrushed, suggesting it barely rose to the level of what he called a shameless infomercial. His review pointed to the highly controlled nature of the production, noting that the documentary never truly came to life as a piece of cinema. The Hollywood Reporter's Frank Scheck took a similar stance, observing that the film fawned so lavishly over its subject that viewers might feel unpatriotic for not sharing its enthusiasm. This observation spoke to what multiple critics identified as a fundamental issue with the documentary's approach. Catherine Shord, writing for The Guardian, characterized the film as exhaustingly boring and chillingly vain. Her review noted that the First Lady appeared to have no friends throughout the documentary and seemed to exist in what Shord described as an entirely airless existence. The critique highlighted a broader concern among reviewers about the lack of meaningful human connection or genuine insight into the subject's life. Sophie Gilbert's review in The Atlantic focused on the absence of action or compelling narrative development. She suggested that director Brett Ratner seemed desperate to find dramatic moments within the footage, but that the material simply did not provide them. The film's slow pace and listless quality became recurring themes in professional reviews. BuzzFeed's Stephanie McNeil went further, calling Melania the worst film she had ever seen. This represented not just a critique of the documentary as a failed project, but a statement about its fundamental quality as a viewing experience. The consistency of these negative assessments across different publications and critics with varying backgrounds suggested genuine issues with the film's execution, rather than simple political bias. On Letterboxd, a social film platform with over 17 million users, the documentary received more than 3,400 reviews shortly after release. The film currently holds a rating of 1.2 out of 5 stars, with 93% of reviewers assigning it the lowest possible rating of half a star. Behind the scenes, the production faced its own controversies. According to a report from Rolling Stone, approximately 2/3 of the film's New York-based crew requested that their names not appear in the final credits. In the film industry, where receiving credit for work on major productions can be crucial for career advancement and professional recognition, such requests are highly unusual. The decision by so many crew members to distance themselves from the project publicly spoke to significant concerns about association with the final product. This unusual situation raised questions about what crew members experienced during production and what their assessment of the finished film might have been. Julie Cohen, who co-directed the acclaimed documentaries RBG and My Name is Paulie Murray, publicly criticized the Melania project. Cohen stated that the film had no artistic or journalistic integrity due to the First Lady's editorial control over the content. She also questioned why Amazon paid such an extraordinarily high price for the distribution rights. This criticism from a respected documentary filmmaker highlighted concerns within the film community about the blurring of lines between journalism, entertainment, and what some characterized as propaganda. The fact that Melania Trump maintained editorial control meant that unflattering moments or critical perspectives were unlikely to appear in the final cut, fundamentally compromising the documentary's ability to provide genuine insight. The content of the film itself became a source of mockery and criticism from various commentators. Trailers and And promotional clips showed the First Lady discussing relatively mundane topics such as her favorite time of day, which she identified as early morning, and her experiences in the fashion industry. Building what she called thick skin, when asked by interviewers to describe the film or highlight its most compelling moments, her responses often centered on surface-level observations. In one interview, when asked about her favorite part of the documentary, she mentioned her husband's YMCA dance moves at rallies. Such responses reinforced the impression that the film lacked substantive content or revelatory insights about her life, role, or perspectives on significant issues. President Donald Trump's enthusiastic promotion of the documentary added another dimension to its reception. Throughout the promotional period, Trump posted repeatedly about the film on Truth Social, calling it a masterpiece and encouraging his supporters to watch it. He described it using terms like beautiful, emotional, fashionable, and cinematic. However, the disconnect between these glowing endorsements and the actual public response became increasingly apparent as box office numbers and critical reviews emerged. For observers who had followed Trump's career, this pattern felt familiar. Throughout his business and political career, Trump has frequently made grandiose claims about projects and initiatives that subsequently failed to meet expectations. The Melania documentary appeared to fit this established pattern of over-promising and under-delivering. The financial dimensions of the project raised numerous questions among industry analysts and political commentators. The $40 million Amazon paid for distribution rights exceeded typical documentary acquisitions by an enormous margin. Ted Hope, who founded and led Amazon's film division until 2020, stated that Melania was probably the most expensive documentary ever made when excluding music licensing costs. For comparison, March Zasa of the Penguins, a documentary that achieved both critical acclaim and commercial success, cost only a fraction of Melania's budget. The nature of Amazon's investment prompted speculation about motivations beyond straightforward commercial calculations. The timing of Amazon's acquisition deal added to these concerns. According to multiple reports, Jeff Bezos, Amazon's founder, had dinner with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago shortly before the deal was announced. Critics suggested that the extraordinary sum paid for the documentary might represent an attempt to curry favor with the incoming administration, rather than a sound business decision based on expected returns. When asked about this at the premiere, House Speaker Mike Johnson defended the arrangement by stating that Amazon is a business operating to make money. However, the financial math appeared questionable. Even with an $8 million opening weekend, the film would need to perform extraordinarily well over an extended period to justify the combined $75 million spent on acquisition and marketing. Some speculation emerged about whether the deal might serve purposes beyond the film itself. The agreement reportedly included not only the theatrical documentary, but also rights to produce a follow-up documentary series. Additionally, Melania Trump herself was reported to have received approximately $28 million as part of the arrangement. These figures prompted questions about whether Amazon was effectively making a payment to the First Lady and her family, while the documentary served as a nominal justification for the transaction. Such arrangements, if accurate, would raise ethical questions about corporations making large payments to political figures and their families. Defenders of the film and the First Lady pushed back against the negative reception, though these defenses came primarily from conservative media outlets and Trump supporters. They argued that criticism of the documentary represented politically motivated attacks rather than genuine assessments of its quality as a film. Some commentators highlighted Melania Trump's philanthropic work, particularly her initiatives focused on protecting children online, and her personal story as an immigrant who became First Lady. One defender lamented that Melania had never appeared on the cover of Vogue magazine during her time as First Lady, suggesting she would have received such honors if her political views aligned differently. However, these defenses largely missed the central critiques of the film. Professional film critics and ordinary viewers who found the documentary unsatisfying were not necessarily dismissing Melania Trump's accomplishments or immigrant story. Rather, they were responding to what they experienced as a dull, superficial, and overly controlled piece of filmmaking that failed to provide genuine insight or entertainment value. The fact that theaters sat largely empty was not the result of coordinated opposition, but rather individual choices by potential viewers who decided the film did not interest them enough to purchase tickets. Bringing up the First Lady's philanthropy or biography while potentially interesting topics, did not address the fundamental question of whether the documentary successfully explored these subjects in a compelling way. Looking toward the future, the film's prospects for recovering its investment through streaming appear uncertain. While Amazon's platform could potentially reach viewers who did not attend theatrical screenings, early indicators suggest limited enthusiasm beyond the core base of Trump supporters who did turn out during opening weekend. The rapid decline in theatrical bookings, with some theaters cancelling screenings and others playing to near-empty auditoriums, signals that word of mouth has not been positive. For a film to succeed over the long term, it generally needs to generate buzz that extends beyond its most committed supporters. The announcement of a follow-up documentary series raised eyebrows among industry observers. Making this announcement before the first film's theatrical performance could be properly evaluated suggested either remarkable confidence or a predetermined commitment, regardless of commercial results. Given the financial arrangement between Amazon and Melania Trump, the follow-up series may proceed regardless of whether it makes business sense from a traditional entertainment perspective. This unusual situation creates a scenario where normal market dynamics and audience feedback may have limited influence on production decisions. For the Trump family and their broader political brand, the documentary's troubled release represents another public relations challenge. The film was meant to showcase Melania Trump in a positive light and perhaps soften her public image. Instead, it generated headlines about empty theaters, scathing reviews, and questions about the enormous sums of money involved. The gap between the triumphant narrative the Trumps promoted and the actual reception the film received became itself a story, one that critics of the administration seized upon as evidence of disconnect from reality. The Melania documentary ultimately serves as a case study in how high-profile vanity projects can falter when subjected to public scrutiny and market forces. Despite unprecedented financial backing, extensive marketing, and promotion from the president himself, the film could not generate broad public interest or critical respect. The factors contributing to this outcome appear to include genuine weaknesses in the film's content and approach, skepticism about the motives behind such a heavily controlled production, limited appeal beyond a specific political demographic, and broader fatigue with Trump family self-promotion. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale about misallocated resources, a failed attempt at image management, or simply an expensive flop, the film's reception offers lessons about the limits of money and political power in guaranteeing cultural success.